Welcome to Aging Insight with your host, John Ross and Lisa Schollmeyer. This program is made possible by
Welcome to another edition of Aging Insight. I'm Lisa Schollmeyer, and I'm here with John Ross, and we're elder law attorneys based here in our local community, and we bring Aging Insight to you every week, so hopefully you can learn about things that are important to you, such as maintaining your independence, not being a burden on others as you enter those retirement years, and not going broke in the process. That's what Aging Insight is all about.
Well, and that last one of those three, protecting what you have, protecting those very necessary resources that you accumulate over a lifetime, that's going to be kind of our topic today as we discuss, what happens when somebody wants to get to what you have.
Right. Well, John, one of the most important pieces of most people's retirement income stream is typically their Social Security check. And, most everybody gets a Social Security check either through their own work history or maybe a deceased spouse or former spouse. And that Social Security payment that comes in each month is a lifeline to so many of the seniors in our community. So one of the fears and concerns that some of those seniors have has to do with, can creditors get to that Social Security check? If you can't pay a credit card or you can't pay a medical bill, is Social Security vulnerable to being garnished for those type of debts?
Well, and creditors can come in a lot of different forms. You've got different types of creditors out there. Maybe you owe money on a credit card, for example, that you just can't pay. Maybe you have other debts like medical bills or something that you can't pay. Could come from, say, an accident, a lawsuit where maybe you were in a car wreck and you've been sued, and if they win that lawsuit and you owe a bunch of money, it could come from there. But then they can also come from other places like tax debt or different things. And so when we're talking about who and when and where somebody might be able to get that Social Security, the first thing is to understand the different types of creditors, because some creditors can get to that Social Security and some of them can't.
Right, so that is the first question. If you owe money, the first thing to look at is who is it that you owe? Because once we answer that question, we can then look further to determine if that Social Security check can be garnished. And John, one of the good news here is for typical type consumer debt, those credit cards, car note, that type of thing, they cannot garnish your Social Security for those type of debts.
Right. So, and probably where we see this a lot of times is it how it relates to particularly medical bills. For many people, when they retire, they get Social Security, and when they get Social Security and they're 65, they also qualify for Medicare. But some people do not turn around and then purchase a Medicare supplement insurance, not realizing that Medicare only pays for about 80% of many costs. And if you have a major medical event, you could owe tens of thousands of dollars if you didn't have that Medicare supplement in place, or other medical bills or other types of creditors. The good thing here is that generally most creditors like that are prohibited from getting to something like Social Security. Based on federal law says those creditors can't get it. So even if they were to file a lawsuit, get a judgment against you, they could not then turn around and apply to have that Social Security garnished in order to pay off that debt, which means that should give you some level of protection. And I've had this conversation, Lisa, several times with folks, especially maybe when they had a spouse who's very ill, and has racked up a lot of medical bills, and they're concerned that either that spouse's Social Security check or possibly even their own Social Security check may be at risk in order to pay those debts, and it's just not.
Right, and so that really is a blessing for a lot of folks. And then, of course, if there are other debts that are more consumer related, such as we see folks who have co-signed on a grandchild's vehicle or
Right.
something like that. Now, certainly, just like with any secured debt, the vehicle itself could be taken by the bank.
Certainly.
But if there is a judgment still owed on the loan, that they cannot get to the senior Social Security check to pay for that.
Right. So we can kind of start out by pointing out that for the most part, most of the debts you see out there are not going to be subject to getting to that Social Security. But of course, there are some bigger creditors
That's
out there.
right. So why don't we take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about where the risks are for the folks that can get to your Social Security if you owe them money. So stick around.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana, and there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, our medical director and nurse practitioner still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
The Wadley Senior Clinic has been such a blessing for our family. Because they specialize in geriatric care, they take the time to really focus on Dad's needs. Their exam rooms are specially designed for seniors, and they offer lab and x-ray on site. With monthly educational programs on health and wellness of the mind and body, our healthcare questions get answered. Best of all, they accept Dad's Medicare benefits. See what the Wadley Senior Clinic can do for you. Wadley Senior Clinic, where healthy relationships begin.
Welcome back. You're watching Aging Insight here with John Ross and Lisa Scholmeyer. And today's topic is protecting that Social Security benefit. So often these days, the only real regular recurring monthly income that people can count on is that Social Security. So many companies don't offer pensions any longer, and even if maybe you got a pension from a spouse, sometimes if that spouse dies, there's no survivor benefit, and so oftentimes that Social Security is the one thing you can count on. And so the question becomes, well, if you've got bills out there,
And we all do.
and we all do, and you get to a point for whatever reason that you can't pay those bills, can they get to the Social Security? And as we talked about before the break, the first thing is that generally, no. If you're talking about your creditors, your medical bills, your credit card debts, your lawsuits, that sort of thing, all of those things are going to be prohibited from getting something like Social Security. Now, there's some other creditors out there, though.
That's right, and really the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the federal government. That is, of course, the source of that Social Security payment. But we have lots of interactions with the federal government, and we could get into a situation where we owe the federal government money. And most people think of this initially as income taxes. That's the first thing people think about. And there could be, if you participated in a federally subsidized home loan or mortgage, then you are paying the federal government. There are lots of agencies and all that if we may be paying, the federal government may be paying us, and if we're overpaid, for instance, from the VA or even Social Security itself, then we could be in a situation where we owe the federal government money. So when the feds want their money, generally they're going to be able to get something, but there's lots of rules on how much they can get and how they have to go about doing so. So
Right.
John?
So, we're going to see this. I would say most commonly you see this in the form of taxes.
Sure.
There's some sort of tax situation that maybe you just didn't see coming, a tax bill that you then cannot pay. And if you don't pay a tax bill, you'll start getting letters from the IRS. Those letters become increasingly threatening. And then eventually you'll get a notice of levy, which basically says, look, we're gonna start taking your stuff. And oftentimes you'll see this where they withhold refunds, future refunds. They can seize bank accounts, but they can also take Social Security, but not all of it.
That's right, not all of it, because the Social Security program is a program designed to make sure that seniors don't fall into poverty in their older age when they can no longer work. And so the restriction on the federal government is even if you owe them taxes, then they can only get to a maximum of 15% of your Social Security check. So, they can't take it all. They can only take 15%. But, of course, these days with the Social Security check, every dollar counts.
Well, and so many people live essentially paycheck to paycheck on that Social Security. It comes in, it gets spent, and so losing a 15% can be a pretty big hit. And the other problem with this is if, for example, the IRS starts levying Social Security, you cannot address this with Social Security.
Right, yeah, your opportunity to challenge that levy, once that notice of levy comes out, and they've, it's basically a final notice that says you owe us. And
Right.
So many seniors, they get those letters from the IRS, and they just ignore them thinking they'll go away. Or it may be that if we have a senior who really is maybe they're taking care of an ill spouse or something like that, they just can't deal with it right then. But once that final letter comes in, you can't fight it at that
Right.
point.
And of course, like I said, IRS is probably the most common, but it's not the only federal government program that is out there. That's the most common, but one that we've started seeing more and more of is student loan debt. Now, you may, a person who's 75 or 80 years old may not have any of their own student loan debt. If they do, and I have had clients in their mid to late 60s who were still paying off that college education. But more commonly, we will see where a child or grandchild went to college, and that very generous senior said, you know what, I appreciate the value of a college education. I want you to get that college education. And so I'm willing to sign as a co-signer on that student loan application. But now student loans, Lisa, they're governed by federal government.
That's right. They are a federal government loan program. And so if that student loan doesn't get paid, that is one of those debts that just never, ever, ever goes away. It cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. There's no length of time, there's no statute of limitations that, it will go away at some point. It's a zombie. It just
Right.
doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of seniors who, because they've co-signed for children or grandchildren, and those children or grandchildren can't pay or won't pay, then now, the government comes after, well, who's got the stream of income that comes in every month?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the senior and that Social Security check. So yes, for student loans, seniors do put their Social Security check at risk, again, up to 15% of that check, but I would think real hard before co-signing on those student loans for that very reason.
Well, and the conversation I've had with clients is they'll say, the child or grandchild or whoever it was, they didn't pay their student loan, and that the federal government's not even sending them letters, they're sending me the letters. Mm-hmm. They're not even trying to go after them, and that's right, they know where the money is.
Right.
And they're gonna pick the lowest hanging fruit. And if they already have your Social Security,
Right.
it's a whole lot easier to take that than it is to try to track down this grandchild who dropped out of college and is now floating around Haight-Ashbury or whatever.
Yes.
So it's there's no priority in that. So I think, and really kind of off the topic, but I don't know, Lisa, have you ever recommended anybody to co-sign on a student loan debt?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no reason. You ought to look at it as can you afford to lose that amount, whatever that amount is. If you're co-signing on it, then you need to have the funds available to pay that in the event it doesn't get paid. And if that's the case, if you have the funds to pay it, then just pay it.
Right.
If you're feeling that generous, then you loan the child the money, and if they don't get, if they don't ever pay it back, well, hey, you're out, and you learned a valuable lesson of don't loan money to family. But at least you don't have the federal government coming in snatching your Social Security because that child dropped out. And this even applies, again, I've had clients who have said, my child graduated top of their class. They're the valedictorian. They're going, they've got they're going to Harvard, and it's a 50% scholarship to go to Harvard, which of course is $50,000 a year. So half is still
a lot of money.
A lot. And yet they say, this child, there's no question, this child's going to finish that college degree, they're going to get a fantastic job, and they're going to be able to pay this money back. And that's true, but what if they become disabled? What if they're in a car wreck? What if, frankly, what if they die?
Well,
because that, that may or may not terminate that debt depending on the circumstances. So lots of issues out there with the federal government being able to collect. So we're going to talk about a few more other little things about this because, the one other person that can collect Social Security, can get to that Social Security is in fact Social Security.
Right. So we do have a couple more creditors that we need you to watch out for. So we'll talk about them after the break.
I'm so glad we found the Wadley Senior Clinic. Their team specializes in caring for older adults, and their doctors listen and work with me to keep me healthy and independent. With monthly educational programs, x-ray and lab, and state-of-the-art exam rooms, I get expert care and understanding about what I'm going through. Best yet, they're easy to get to right off the interstate at Jefferson. See what Wadley Senior Clinic could do for you. Wadley Senior Clinic, where healthy relationships begin.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana, and there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, our medical director and nurse practitioner still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
Welcome back to Aging Insight. I'm Lisa Scholmeyer here with John Ross. And today we're talking about creditors that could get to your Social Security check and diminish how much you are receiving each month from Social Security. Now, we started out today's program letting you know that for the most part, consumer type debts cannot touch your Social Security. However, the federal government and the various money programs that you might participate in over the years, the feds can get to your Social Security. And we've talked about income taxes, that your Social Security can be garnished to pay back taxes, can also be garnished to pay for student loans for yourself or someone you've co-signed for. And then just real quickly, Social Security can also be garnished if you haven't paid some mortgage that you've gotten through a federal mortgage program such as FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, or VA has mortgage programs for veterans.
Or maybe a Small Business Administration loan that you got to start that business many years ago that's,
Right.
you know, they're still paying on,
Yeah.
or never got paid or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of different places, but one of the ones that we haven't really talked about is Social Security Administration itself. And we actually see Social Security collect Social Security back on a routine basis, and that is because Social Security, the way they pay, it's a very complicated system that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They say that, you know, your birth month is actually the first full month that you're alive, and so if you die during a month, oftentimes Social Security, depending on the date you passed away, they'll come in and take that last payment back. They have the ability to reach in and pull back. But the other thing that we've seen a lot of times, especially in our area where we have a lot of federal employees and we have a lot of Texas teachers, both of which, depending on how they've structured their retirement, may or may not have paid any Social Security during their lifetime. When they were working, there was no withholdings for Social Security, and that's because they worked for the railroad, which has its special rules, or they worked for the Texas Teacher Retirement System, which has its own special rules. And there's things called the federal offset that means that you can't essentially double dip. You can't get Social Security if you also got this, if you didn't pay into it, and you're
Right.
getting this federal pension instead. But we have seen situations where somebody goes and collects Social Security, and then sometime later there's some sort of triggering event where they become eligible for a different federal program that now is subject to that offset, and maybe those two institutions don't talk to each other, or maybe they do. But one way or the other, you get a bill from the Social Security that says, we have overpaid you
Yeah.
for the last year or 2 years or 3 years. And depending on the circumstances, this could put you at risk to tens of thousands of dollars that Social Security wants to get paid back.
Right, and frankly, I think we probably see this the most frequently with our teachers, in the sense that, you know, they have this windfall elimination, and if you're out there and you have no idea what I'm talking about, but if you're a teacher, you're very well aware of this windfall elimination provision. And so if you are a teacher who filed for Social Security at 62 or 63, and then later on at 65, you started taking, some sort of teacher retirement, well, then oftentimes Social Security would like to offset and get paid back for what they paid you in the prior 2 years. And when they want their money back, they want it back now.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Now, one last thing. We started this whole thing off by saying your general creditors, your credit cards, your other creditors that are out there, that those folks cannot get to Social Security. And that's true, but they can get to things like bank accounts.
Sure, if they get a judgment for
If
a
they get
debt
a
that you
judgment,
owe.
that's right, they can get to bank accounts. So for example, if I've got my Social Security going into an account, and maybe I don't even really use this account that much, my Social Security just goes into it, and then maybe I've got some other savings and stuff that is in that account, and it's all mixed up together, and I have a creditor that gets a judgment, and then they try to levy that judgment against the bank account. You know, there's no limits on that depending on the circumstances. They could take everything that's in that bank account. That would then include my Social Security. And I could probably get that back, but imagine the kind of legal wrangling you're going to have to do, going back to court and making the argument that part of that is Social Security and maybe some of it is not Social Security, and trying to prove all of that. And so oftentimes, Lisa, I would say, you know, considering Social Security has a very particular set of rules around it, and other assets are different, it actually might make more sense for people to have an account that their Social Security goes into and to keep that separate
Right.
from other accounts.
Well, particularly if you're aware that you do have some debt problems or some unresolved debt issues, well, then I certainly would recommend that you open an account where your Social Security comes in each month. And if you're using that to live on, well, then you transfer it to a household type checking account to, for your automatic drafts and things, but yet the account where your Social Security comes into is not, you're not commingling other pension funds, other savings, so that way it's real easy to separate quickly should anything come up.
Right. And lastly is, if you do have some debts out there, know which ones can get to Social Security and which ones cannot. And so, for example, if you owe the IRS, it may make more sense to go get a loan from a bank, use that loan to pay the IRS, and now you're paying the bank. And if you get to a point where you can't pay the bank, at least the bank can't get to your Social Security, where the IRS could have. Yeah. And if it's bad enough, visit with a bankruptcy attorney as kind of a last-ditch effort. So lots of different things to look for in all of this.
Yeah, so you want to protect your Social Security because it is such an important tool that you use in your retirement, and that's part of making sure that you are as independent as you can be and not a burden on other friends and family. So you got to look out for yourself and take care of your business and protect that Social Security check. That's
right. And if you want to learn more about this sort of thing, you can always listen to us live every Saturday at noon on 98.5 FM, where we have Aging Insight Radio. It's live call-in. You can call in. And of course, the 2015 edition of Aging Insight magazine that has all kinds of articles about this sort of thing, as well as a list of all the different senior services that are available in your area. If you're watching this, it covers your area. Those are available in your doctor's offices and all around the community and in our office, and so you should be able to find one of those out there. So lots of places to get more information, and of course you can always just keep watching Aging Insight.
Aging Insight TV. Well, we'll be back with you next week, so we look forward to sharing with you what we know that benefits you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Aging Insight program with John Ross and Lisa Scholmeyer. This program is made possible by